They say the world ends not with a bang, but a whimper. They were wrong. For me, it began with a shriek, the sound of tearing metal, of screaming air, and then silence. A silence so profound it vibrated in my bones, colder than the Arctic wind whipping through the newly formed chasm where the bridge used to be. One moment, rushing home, headlights cutting through the blizzard. The next, the abyss yawned. My car, a twisted monument to a life that had just been severed, dangled precariously. A single cracked headlight stubbornly burning, casting a weak, frantic beam into the swirling snow hundreds of feet below. I could hear the faint, guttural groans of tortured steel, protesting its final surrender to gravity. My breath hitched, a thin, icy wisp in the sub-zero air. My body screamed, every nerve aflame, but my mind was numb, locked in a terrifying loop. Asterisk, what happened? Who did this? Asterisk, the tremor that just rocked the city wasn't an accident. Not with this surgical precision. Not with this calculated, impossible devastation. This wasn't chaos. It was a message, and I was trapped inside its bloody envelope. My phone, dead. My escape route, gone. But the dread wasn't just the sheer, dizzying drop, or the bone-chilling cold gnawing at my extremities. It was the crushing weight of knowing I was seen. A specific target. A predator, waiting for its prey to fall. Below, through the swirling white, I swore I saw movement. A flicker of infrared. A shadow. They didn't just want the bridge gone. They wanted me gone. And the fall? That might be the least of my worries. Because if I survive this, then the real hunt begins. Years melted into a solitary existence. A muted tapestry woven from regret and routine. Adrian moved through life like a ghost. His sparse apartment, a sanctuary built from the wreckage of a past he couldn't outrun. Each day was a quiet penance. The world outside a distant hum he had consciously chosen to ignore. But some echoes, however faint, refused to die. A news anchor's polished voice, a fleeting image on a flickering screen, a rising corporate titan, philanthropic, powerful. A name Adrian barely registered, yet a flicker of unease, cold and subtle as a whispered threat, stirred deep within him. It was a tremor from an old, buried fault line, a warning that the silence he had so painstakingly built might be about to shatter. The city's roar was a symphony Adrian rarely heard, a cacophony he'd learned to tune out. He moved through the bustling square, a phantom amidst the living, his thoughts a distant echo of forgotten pain. Then the world fractured. Time, a relentless current, ceased its flow. Across the churning sea of faces, a flash of vibrant color, a laugh carried on the wind, a face etched forever in his memory. Alara, radiant, beautiful, utterly alive, a stark, brutal contrast to the ghost he had become. The air sucked from his lungs, the noise of the city instantly deafening, then fading to nothing. Her presence was a physical blow, a ghost limb throbbing back to agonizing life. Instinct, sharp and unyielding, propelled him forward, a shadow clinging to her light. He found her in a quaint cafe, the aroma of coffee unable to mask the acrid taste of dread in his mouth. He watched, a silent sentinel, as a man joined her victor, charismatic, handsome, a stark picture of everything Adrian had once dreamed of being. Then, the glint of metal, a soft murmur, and Victor's hand slipping a ring onto Alara's finger. An engagement ring. The world didn't just crumble. It imploded. Every sacrifice, every silent night, every agonizing memory of pushing her away, it was all for this. A life he couldn't touch, a future he had willingly given away, now sealed with a diamond and a stranger's smile. Grief transformed into a cold, burning suspicion. Adrian retreated to the digital abyss, the familiar hum of servers replacing the city's drone. Victor's public persona was immaculate. A titan of industry, a paragon of philanthropy, a life carefully curated for public consumption. But Adrian's eyes, trained in the shadows, saw beyond the dazzling veneer. He dissected digital footprints, cross-referenced obscure databases, parsed metadata with practiced precision. Beneath the layers of glowing press releases and glossy profiles, subtle anomalies surfaced, a pattern of missing information, inconsistencies in timelines, a faint, almost imperceptible tremor in the digital fabric. The Manolera was about to marry war a meticulously crafted mask, and Adrian's forgotten instincts were screaming that something was fundamentally, dangerously wrong. The deeper Adrian dug, the more the polished surface of Victor's life began to crack. He followed breadcrumbs into the darkest corners of the dark web, sifting through hushed whispers and censored reports. A minor rumor emerged, almost untraceable, about a venture from Victor's past, a shadowy investment firm that had vanished without a trace, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions, collapsed businesses, and a disturbing pattern of associates who had simply disappeared. The unease, once a flicker, solidified into a cold, hard certainty. This wasn't just about a broken heart. It was about Alara's safety. He had pushed her away to protect her from his world, only for her to stumble into one far more insidious, far more dangerous. The stakes had just escalated beyond anything he'd imagined. A raw, guttural ache in his chest pulled him back, a jagged splinter of memory. The sterile, cold apartment. Alara's tear-streaked face, eyes wide with incomprehension. He remembers the words he forced out, vague, dismissive excuses about needing to be alone, about not being enough. Lies, all of them. His own eyes, even then, betrayed the deeper, unutterable pain, the desperate, crushing need to protect her from the life that stalked him. He had watched her break, her world splintering around her, and he had been the architect of that devastation. Every ounce of his being had screamed to hold her, to explain, but he had ripped himself away, condemning himself to an eternity of lonely penance, believing it was the only way to save her from the inevitable storm. The choice was made, the ghost of a past love resurrecting a ghost from his own life. His hand, steady despite the tremor in his soul, reached into a hidden compartment behind a loose brick in the wall, a relic from another lifetime. From its dusty confines, he retrieved it. A beaten, encrypted burner phone, a tool of a trade he had sworn to abandon forever. The faint, almost imperceptible click as he activated it resonated like a thunderclap in the oppressive silence. The screen flickered to life, a cold, clinical glow reflecting in his hardened eyes. Adrian, the man who had sought oblivion, was gone. In his place stood the shadow he had once been, grim resolve settling over him like a shroud. The past had returned, and it demanded its price. The city, once a blurred backdrop, transformed into a complex chessboard. Adrian moved through its veins, a phantom once more, but this time with purpose. He became a part of the urban hum, invisible yet all-seeing. Meticulous surveillance began. Victor's life, so public and polished, started to unravel under Adrian's trained gaze. He observed clandestine meetings in shadowy alleyways, hushed conversations in luxury cars, and security protocols far too sophisticated for a mere philanthropist. Each movement, each whispered word, each unusual detail confirmed the gnawing suspicion Victor was not who he seemed. The fiancé was a predator, and Adrian, the silent hunter, was now on his trail, the first move made in a deadly game he hadn't chosen, but was destined to finish. The city's hum was a dull roar beneath Adrian's skin, every nerve attuned to the silent hum of the device he meticulously planted. Hidden in plain sight, a microscopic ear now listened where Adrian couldn't. Hours bled into the night, the static of an open channel a torment, until it wasn't. A clipped voice, Victor's, sliced through the air, followed by another, cold and distant. The asset is secured. Phase 2 initiated. The words were cryptic, a chilling cadence in the dark, yet Adrian felt their weight like a physical blow. This wasn't about boardroom power plays or market manipulation. This was a deeper current, darker and far more predatory than he'd imagined, flowing beneath the polished surface of Victor's empire. The game had begun, and Adrian was already a pawn. The digital landscape of Victor's network was a labyrinth, but Adrian moved through it like a ghost in the machine. Less secured portals, forgotten back doors, each one a whisper in the silent expanse of data. He didn't just hack. He felt the currents, following the faint resonance of encrypted packets, a digital breadcrumb trail stretching across continents. Files appeared, fragmented and coded, hinting at shell corporations and phantom transactions, each leading closer to an impossible truth. Then, a nexus. A hidden server, buried deep within a forgotten corner of the dark web, a fortress of secrets Adrian knew he had to breach. The air crackled with the silent war, his fingers a blur, each keystroke a silent scream against the approaching storm. A burner phone, a fleeting moment of hesitation, then Adrian sent the message. Cryptic, urgent, devoid of any personal signature, a desperate, anonymous whisper into the void, hoping to stir Alara from her blissfully unaware slumber. He pictured her face, the soft curve of her smile, and a knot of dread tightened in his gut. Meanwhile, miles away, Alara glanced at her phone, a notification chiming. An unknown number, a garbled string of words hinting at danger and Victor's true nature. A fleeting frown creased her brow. Spam. A cruel joke. With a dismissive shrug, she deleted it, an invisible curtain falling between his desperate plea and her unknowing world. The irony was a bitter taste in Adrian's mouth, a silent scream of regret echoing in his chest. The burner phone buzzed, a jarring intrusion into the quiet despair. Adrian snatched it, his heart hammering a frantic rhythm. An anonymous message. Not code, not data, but something far more chilling. A picture. Alara, laughing, vibrant, caught in a candid moment at what looked like a recent outdoor market. Her smile was beautiful, untouched, and utterly oblivious. Below the image, a string of seemingly random characters formed a brutal, undeniable threat. Victor knew. He didn't just know Adrian was watching. He knew his Achilles heel. The photograph was a declaration of war. A cold, calculated move that shattered Adrian's precarious calm, replacing it with a primal roar of fear and incandescent rage. Alara was no longer safe, and it was his fault. He found Adrian in a gallery, amidst abstract art and hushed conversations. Victor, smooth and impeccably tailored, materialized with a disarming smile, extending a hand. Adrian, isn't it? A pleasure. The words were honeyed, but Victor's eyes, even as he spoke of market trends, were cold, appraising, like a predator sizing up its prey. He probed, subtly, fishing for tells, testing the waters, every gesture a calculated move. Adrian maintained his cover, a polite, almost aloof politeness, but beneath the facade, his muscles were coiled, ready to spring. The air between them thrummed with unspoken knowledge, a psychological duel played out with pleasantries and veiled threats, the stakes invisible but deadly. This was no chance encounter. This was Victor's opening gambit. Hours bled into a haze of caffeine and raw determination. The final firewall dissolved with a triumphant, yet terrifying, cascade of data. Victor's core files spilled forth, not just corporate secrets, but a sprawling, venomous truth. Adrian stared, horrified, at evidence of a global criminal syndicate, its tendrils reaching into the highest echelons of power. Political assassinations, arms trafficking, corporate espionage on an unimaginable scale, and at its dark heart, a direct, undeniable link to the very organization Adrian had fled years ago. The one that had shattered his life and forced him to abandon Alara. Victor wasn't just connected. He was the architect, the puppet master, the mastermind behind the shadow world Adrian had once inhabited. The scale of the monster was breathtaking. The pieces clicked into place with sickening precision, each connection a fresh stab of betrayal. Victor's involvement wasn't incidental. He was a key player, perhaps even the architect, of the operation that had forced Adrian to disappear, to sever all ties. He had lost everything, including Alara, to escape that life. Now Victor was dragging him back, and Alara was the bait. Her engagement, the chance encounter with Adrian, all of it meticulously orchestrated, a cruel, elaborate trap. Adrian's sacrifice, his desperate attempt to protect her, had been rendered meaningless. He had pushed her away to shield her from this very darkness, only to find her now, unwittingly at its very center, a pawn in a game he never wanted to play again. The weight of it was suffocating. Alara, wrapped in the comforting illusion of Victor's charm, began to feel a subtle dissonance. A fleeting coldness in his eyes when he thought she wasn't looking, a calculating flash that vanished as quickly as it appeared. A subtle shift in his story about an old university friend, a detail that didn't quite align with something he'd mentioned weeks earlier. These were tiny cracks, almost imperceptible, in the polished facade of the man she was set to marry. Her intuition, long dormant, began to stir, a quiet alarm bell ringing in the periphery of her perfect life. The man she loved, the man who seemed to embody everything she desired, suddenly felt like a stranger, a perfectly constructed enigma whose edges were beginning to fray. The world he'd fought so hard to escape found him anyway. A cold, stark message materialized on a burner phone, its encrypted pixels a venomous invitation. Victor. No threats, just an offer. A thinly veiled challenge designed to prick the ego of a ghost. Adrian stared at the glowing screen, the faint hum of the city outside a stark contrast to the silence that screamed in his mind. It was a game, precisely the kind he used to play, a game with rules only Victor understood. He knew it was a trap, felt its jaws already closing. But sometimes a choice isn't really a choice at all. Sometimes the path of least resistance leads straight into the viper's nest, because there's nowhere else left to go. The serpent had called, and Adrian, heavy with a past he couldn't outrun, was compelled to answer. Muscle memory is a cruel comfort. In the dusty quiet of a forgotten safe house, Adrian moved with practiced, chilling efficiency. Old gear emerged from hidden compartments. A suppressed pistol, its weight familiar in his palm. Sleek, razor-sharp blades. A small, almost imperceptible comms unit. Each piece was a ghost from a life he'd buried, now resurfacing for an inevitable confrontation. He checked the magazine, the safety, the worn grip, his movements precise, almost ritualistic. A flicker of hope compelled him to dial a long-retired contact, a number etched deep in his memory. The line went dead after 2 rings, a stark, metallic click echoing his growing isolation. Victor's reach was wider, deeper than he'd imagined. There would be no backup. Just him, against the shadow he'd spent years avoiding. The meeting point was a desolate symphony of rust and decay, an abandoned industrial complex, the skeletal remains of forgotten ambition. Adrian moved through the cavernous space, each echoing step a testament to the emptiness. Victor emerged from the shadows, not with a fanfare, but with the quiet confidence of a predator. His smile, when it came, was a razor's edge. Adrian, he purred, his voice resonating with chilling calm. It's been too long. And then the casual flick of a verbal switch. Victor spoke of Alara, of their breakup, revealing a terrifying, intimate knowledge of Adrian's past, and the true, devastating reason he pushed her away. The air thickened with unspoken threats, the metallic tang of fear, Adrian's carefully constructed facade beginning to crack under the weight of Victor's insidious omniscience. Victor's voice, a silken whip, cut through the industrial silence. He laid out his proposition. Rejoin his syndicate, lend his unique, lethal skills to Victor's empire, or face a far more brutal consequence. Not just exposure Adrian's past, his true identity, laid bare for Alara to see, but something far more insidious. Victor would orchestrate an accidental involvement, pulling Alara into the syndicate's shadowy activities, making her an unwitting target, a pawn in a game she didn't even know existed. Adrian felt a primal roar of fury claw at his throat, but held it back, his jaw clenched, muscles screaming for release. The choice was a torment. Surrender his freedom, or condemn the only person he'd ever truly loved to a terrifying, dangerous fate. The serpent had offered him an apple, poisoned to its core. Adrian's response was a mask of cold compliance, a nod that cost him everything. He feigned acceptance, buying precious seconds, a desperate attempt to thread a needle in Victor's intricate web. With a subtle flick of his wrist, barely perceptible, a tiny, almost invisible tracking device found its home on Victor's expensive jacket. A silent prayer launched into the digital ether. But Victor's control was absolute. Every attempt Adrian made to contact an outside source, every encrypted message, every silent plea for help, was met with a dead end. All avenues were blocked, every line cut. Victor's reach wasn't just wide, it was total, suffocating. The realization was a crushing blow. Adrian was truly alone, a lamb led willingly to slaughter, but not without a silent, desperate prayer for a miracle. Suspicion, a slow-burning ember, had been kindled in Alara's heart. She'd watched Victor, felt the cold detachment beneath his charm, sensed the calculating darkness. Now, hidden, her phone recording, she listened as his voice, once so captivating, revealed its true, terrifying nature. He spoke of utility, of her role in baiting Adrian, of her accidental involvement as a means to an end. Each casual word was a hammer blow, shattering the fragile reality she'd built around herself. The world tilted, the lavish surroundings of Victor's home suddenly twisting into a gilded cage. The man she'd allowed into her life, the man who'd promised a future, was a predator, and she was merely prey. Her gasp was stifled, but the horror in her eyes was a scream. Her world, in that moment, became a splintered, terrifying mosaic. The subtle shift in the air, the sudden, almost imperceptible tension in Victor's security detail, was all Alara needed. They knew. Her cover was blown. The luxurious home, once a sanctuary, became a sprawling, opulent prison. Panic, raw and visceral, spurred her into action. She moved, a blur of motion through polished halls and antique-laden rooms, the echoes of her frantic footsteps swallowed by thick carpets. Victor's men, a dark wave of tailored suits, were already closing in, their movements swift and silent, like a pack of wolves cornering their quarry. Each door, each hallway became a potential trap. The lavish decor blurred into a frantic montage of escape attempts, the cold reality of her capture drawing nearer with every pounding beat of her terrified heart. Adrian watched the tracking on his screen, Victor's movements slow, deliberate, a viper coiling. Then, a sudden, frantic burst of static, a distorted, cryptic distress signal from Alara's abandoned phone. A single, almost inaudible word, her name. His blood ran cold. He didn't need details. The raw terror in that broken signal spoke volumes. Victor had moved. Alara was in immediate, grave danger. A primal, guttural roar tore through Adrian's control. The past, the sacrifice, all of it coalesced into a singular, burning imperative. Save her. His vehicle screamed to life, tires biting asphalt, a blur of metal and desperate speed. The tracker, once a tool for observation, was now a desperate lifeline, guiding him into the heart of the storm. He was a ghost, now tangible, racing against the unforgiving clock. The alley reeked of stale refuse and fear. Alara, cornered, eyes wide with terror, braced for the inevitable. Then, a blur, a phantom from a past she thought long buried. Adrian. He moved like a ghost, a whirlwind of trained fury, a precise, brutal ballet of bone and impact. His old skills resurfaced, lethal and instinctual, each strike a whisper of the life he tried to leave behind. He was a shield, a force field, but the numbers were overwhelming. Every blocked punch, every deflected blade, vibrated with a raw desperation. His gaze, even amidst the chaos, flickered to Alara, a silent promise of protection, a desperate plea for her to stay safe as the concrete beneath them became a canvas for a brutal, life-or-death skirmish. The air crackled with the sharp scent of ozone and effort, and the sound of bodies hitting brick. Breathless, hunted, they found a fleeting moment of respite in the belly of a forgotten city, the distant wail of sirens a constant reminder of their precarious existence. Alara, her face streaked with dirt and tears, finally demanded answers, her voice trembling with a cocktail of rage and hurt. Adrian, exhaustion etched into every line of his face, knew there was no escape now. The dam broke. Words, heavy with years of silence and sacrifice, tumbled out his past, the mission Victor's shadow, the crushing weight of why he left her. The truth wasn't a bomb. It was a fresh wound, deep and festering. Each confession, a shard of glass, revealing a hidden world of espionage and betrayal, a life he had condemned himself to, all to keep her safe. The air grew thick with unspoken pain, the bitter taste of secrets finally exposed. The revelations hung heavy between them, the weight of his sacrifice almost too much to bear. Alara's anger, a fiery shield, began to crumble, revealing the raw anguish beneath. She saw not just the man who left her, but the man who had carried an impossible burden, who had walked through fire to keep her from its flames. Tears tracked silent rivers down her face, no longer just for her own pain, but for his. In that moment of shared vulnerability, amidst the encroaching danger, a flicker of something ancient and resilient rekindled. Forgiveness wasn't spoken. It was felt, a silent promise in the tightening grip of her hand. A renewed love that had survived betrayal and despair. Now the enemy wasn't just Victor. It was the past, and they would face it, together. News of Adrian's resurgence ignited a cold fury in Victor. The chess pieces he'd so carefully arranged were now scattered, his control threatened. This wasn't just about the mission anymore. It was personal. An old wound, festering for years, tore open. He unleashed his network, a dark web of relentless pursuit, across the city. Mercenaries, shadows themselves, were mobilized, their faces grim, their methods brutal. Victor's voice, cold and precise over encrypted lines, outlined not just a capture, but a retribution, fueled by past failures and a deep-seated obsession with Adrian. The hunt was on, a predator stalking its prey, the city shrinking around Adrian and Alara. Every shadow a potential threat, every moment a ticking clock. Victor's eyes gleamed with a chilling, possessive rage. Adrian's safe house, a ghost of his former life, was meant to be their haven, a meticulously planned sanctuary, designed to vanish from the grid. But Victor's reach was longer, his network swifter. The illusion of safety shattered with the deafening crash of splintering wood and blaring alarms. They were compromised. Desperation clawed at Adrian as he pulled Alara through a labyrinth of collapsing walls and flying debris. The chase was relentless, a high-speed blur through the city's underbelly, through choked alleyways, across rooftops, the echoing thunder of pursuit ever present. Every turn was a gamble, every shadow a potential ambush. The city itself became a weapon, a concrete beast snapping at their heels, and Adrian felt the bitter taste of defeat, realizing they were outmaneuvered, always one step behind. Cornered, resources dwindling, the exhaustion a heavy cloak, Adrian knew escape was no longer enough. Running meant a life forever looking over their shoulders, a future perpetually stolen. His mind, honed by years of impossible odds, raced. A risky, audacious plan began to form, not just to survive but to dismantle. To expose Victor's empire, to tear down the very foundations of his power. It meant stepping into the heart of the storm, placing his freedom, his life, everything on the line. Alara watched him, a quiet terror in her eyes, but also an unwavering trust. This wasn't just about them anymore. It was about reclaiming a world that Victor had poisoned. The stakes had never been higher, the resolve never more absolute. This was their final stand. The plan was a single, desperate breath held in the face of oblivion. Adrian moved like a shadow through Victor's fortress, each step measured, each breath controlled. The hum of servers, the cold, sterile air of power. This was the heart of the beast. Fingers danced across keyboards, a silent symphony of sabotage, uploading encrypted data to every corner of the globe. Or perhaps, a direct confrontation, Victor's arrogant confession echoing through a hidden microphone, broadcasting his crimes to a world that would finally listen. The tension was a palpable current, every second stretched taut, a razor's edge between triumph and utter annihilation. One wrong move, one flicker of hesitation, and everything they fought for would be lost, their lives swallowed by the darkness they sought to expose. The truth exploded, a digital wildfire consuming Victor's meticulously constructed empire. Screens everywhere blared his downfall, his carefully cultivated image dissolving into public outrage. Chaos erupted. Victor, a cornered animal, unleashed his remaining forces in a desperate, destructive pursuit. The city became a war zone, a swirling maelstrom of sirens, screeching tires, and shattered glass. Adrian and Alara, now symbols of defiance, were caught in the eye of the storm. The climactic chase was a ballet of destruction, a collapsing network trying to drag them down with it. Their world was tearing itself apart, the cost of exposing the truth immense. Yet in the heart of the maelstrom, a fierce, defiant hope flickered, the promise of a future, finally free, forged in the ashes of Victor's ruin. The fire's echoes faded, replaced by the crushing quiet of a world he almost lost. Alara, her touch, a fragile anchor in the storm he'd barely survived. In her eyes, I saw not just forgiveness, but a fierce, devastating understanding. We stood on the precipice of a new dawn, the immediate danger a ghost, but the shadows of my past still clung, heavy and cold. This fragile peace, this stolen moment, it was a mirage. I could drag her deeper into the abyss, or I could finally, truly let her go. My heart screamed for a different path, for a life I'd always been denied, but her future was not mine to endanger. The truth, a bitter gift, was all I had left. I wouldn't be truly free until I broke every chain, even the one that bound me to her love. This wasn't another escape, it was a sacrifice. A final goodbye so she could finally live. I turned, leaving behind the only light I'd ever known, vanishing into the unforgiving promise of a solitary freedom. The air crackled, not with ice, but with the raw, volatile electricity of an unraveling truth. His face, illuminated by flickering emergency lights, was a mask of calculated ice, betraying no regret. You were always an inconvenient variable, Kael, he sneered, his voice a low, venomous hiss, a loose end that refused to fray. The gun in my hand felt impossibly heavy, an extension of my own burning resolve. But the weight of what I just uncovered, the sprawling web of corruption, the depth of their reach, the innocent lives he'd sacrificed, that was heavier still. This wasn't just about survival. It was about stopping the rot, severing the head of the snake before it devoured the city. A single shot echoed, a deafening punctuation mark on a chapter of betrayal. He fell, not with a dramatic cry, but a surprised gasp, his eyes wide, reflecting the cold, empty steel of the floor. The silence that followed was grim, hard-won victory. Yet, as I holstered the weapon, the chilling truth settled. This wasn't over. One head might be gone, but the Hydra still breathed. The storm outside had broken, revealing a bruised, hopeful dawn, but I knew the shadows still stretched long. My escape from the abyss was just the beginning. The world had shown me its true face, and I wouldn't look away. Couldn't. The fight had only just begun.